Hi all, welcome back to DBU. Thanks for watching and please subscribe. In our last episode, we briefly discussed cable anatomy. Today we're going to pick up from where we left off with balanced audio. So what is this balanced versus unbalanced thing? Well, balancing audio is a complex method of noise reduction used in audio equipment. By employing specialized transformers or active circuits called balancing amplifiers at the input and output of each piece of audio gear, we can effectively cancel the noise using polarity reversal. Before the signal travels down the mic cable, we first flip one signal out of phase with respect to the other. When the signal arrives at the other side, it's flipped back in phase. Therefore, any noise voltage or common signal to both the plus and minus that's picked up along the way is thus canceled out when it reaches the balancing amplifier on the input of the next device. It's a rather ingenious design. This is also referred to as common mode rejection. Unbalanced equipment doesn't really have this provision. There is a form of balancing known as servo balancing. Servo balancing is like a fake balanced, sort of like bonded leather or breast implants. It looks real from a distance, but on closer examination, it's obvious that compromises were made to make it work. It involves using additional circuitry to balance the inputs and outputs of a device and is frequently found in semi-pro gear. Usually, there are reference level compromises involved to make it work. We'll dig into that stuff later. Just to be clear though, this does not mean that unbalanced audio is inferior to balanced. Plenty of examples of high-end audio hardware actually unbalance the signal once the signal is inside the gear anyways, mostly because it's easier to work with. Truthfully, if a piece of gear is properly designed, it should be transparent to the user. I have plenty of boxes here that run unbalanced, and they perform just as fine as their balanced counterparts. Technically, balancing is quieter, but unless you're running long audio lines, it's really doubtful you'd hear much of a difference. There is one issue we can run into when mixing balanced, unbalanced, and servo balanced signals together though. Because balanced audio contains an extra leg of audio, it's going to be 6 dB louder or twice as loud than its unbalanced counterpart. To complicate matters further, the two circuits don't typically like to be interconnected in just any old way. On a balanced XLR, flipping polarity tends to be a nearly transparent transaction on a mono signal. In an unbalanced circuit, however, the positive signal in the balanced circuit must be connected to the positive signal of the unbalanced device. If you were to connect the negative of the balanced device to the positive of the unbalanced device, it can actually do some really nasty things. Usually it will cancel out much of the signal, leaving a very unpleasant, low-level, thin-sounding tone. This is what we call a single-ended circuit, and it can happen without your knowledge just by hooking the gear up wrong. The real problem became apparent when we switched from barrier strips to XLR connectors back in the 70s. You see, both balanced and unbalanced signals have been known to utilize the XLR connector, but along the way there has been some generational disagreement, if you will, between manufacturers as to which of the 3 pins on the XLR should be the hot. The standard today is pin 2 hot per AES 14-1992. Some gear prior to 1985 could be pin 3 hot, which conversely means pin 2 is cold, depending on what country you lived in, or who made your gear and when. If you were to connect such devices together via their mismatched XLRs, you would run into that single-ended problem. For this reason, a lot of techs have just modernized the gear and put a note on the chassis clearly labeling it as pin 2 hot. Either way, this will become a problem for you as you mix older vintage gear with some newer stuff. Moving back to audio grounding here. The audio ground is always pin 1. When studios are wired, they rely on a few different schemes of audio grounding to make it work. I sort of referenced this earlier. Two of the most common techniques are star grounding and telescoping. In a star-grounded system, all of the audio ground wires are tied to one common destination, usually referred to as the technical ground. This plays quite nice with the theory that we discussed in our last video, that all ground should be forced to go to one place. A lot of planning has to go into an installation like this because you need to include a pathway to get all of the devices back to that singular ground point. Telescoping is a different approach, and it's what I'm using here in my studio. Telescoping is a technique where the grounds are all constructed normally, but tied back or lifted on the inputs of every piece of gear. The theory is that whatever ground loops might be created are broken before the loop can reach the input of the next device. It does work pretty well, especially when you're in a large installation, although it's a somewhat controversial topic among some of the techs I've worked with. Some really believe in the mantra that we should let the gear decide. Smaller installations, home studios in particular, can get away with using a standard grounding scheme, especially if you're using small prefabricated patch bays. In this context, it's generally fine to leave all the grounds connected. The idea is that the hub of your system, usually it's your console or Pro Tools rig, decides what to do with the noise, if any exists. If you do run into the occasional noise issue, try individually lifting the audio ground at the input of the offending device and see if it helps. When a system is designed properly and connected the right way, it's really amazing how cooperative your gear will be. That's all I have time for today. I encourage you to subscribe to my content, leave a comment, and check back for more stuff. Thank you for watching. Until next time, cheers.